A little girl stands trembling in a dark alley, clutching a torn blanket to her chest. Her tangled hair clings to tear-streaked cheeks, and her voice shakes as she looks up at the detective. "Please," she whispers weakly, "save my baby. That man, he's so cruel." Beside her, the detective's loyal German shepherd tenses, a low growl rumbling deep in its throat, ready to protect. The humid night presses down on Charleston as Detective Jack Harris kneels beside the child, unaware this single moment will change everything. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The summer heat clung to Charleston like a wet shroud, thick and humming with cicadas. The streets near the harbor shimmered with the mirage of steam rising off cracked asphalt, and the scent of salt, fried fish, and old rainwater mingled in the air. Detective Jack Harris wiped a streak of sweat from his temple as he walked down Meeting Street, his coat slung over one arm. He was a man in his 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man whose presence filled a room without sound. His once black hair had faded to a dark ash, and the faint shadow of a beard traced his square jawline. Not because he wanted to look rugged, but because he'd stopped caring about small vanities long ago. Losing his wife 3 summers before had carved quiet into him. His voice was low, steady, and his eyes, the color of storm water, missed nothing. At his side padded Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd with golden brown fur and intelligent, patient eyes. The dog walked slightly ahead, nose twitching, his gait alert yet calm, the disciplined stride of a soldier who had served beside men and seen more than most would believe. Jack often said Rex was the better half of their partnership, the one with instinct where reason faltered. They had been out investigating a minor insurance fraud case, something dull and forgettable. But as the evening settled in and the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Jack felt the day wasn't done with him yet. He trusted those instincts, the same instincts that had kept him alive through 2 tours overseas and a decade of chasing shadows through the city's back streets. When Rex stiffened suddenly, ears pricking, Jack followed his line of sight toward a narrow alley behind an old seafood shop, where the smell of rot was strongest. The dog let out a low growl, not the kind meant to threaten, but the sound he made when something humanly wrong was near. Jack's hand brushed his pistol out of habit, though he rarely had to use it anymore. "Easy, boy," he murmured, stepping into the alley's gloom. The air shifted, cooler, damp, touched by fear. Then he saw it. A small figure slumped beside a trash bin, thin arms wrapped around a cardboard box. The child's face was streaked with grime, her hair a tangled halo of pale brown curls sticking to her damp forehead. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Jack dropped to one knee, his voice soft. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes too old for her age, wide, brown, trembling. She tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. Rex moved closer, sniffing the air, then gently nudged the girl's arm with his nose. The child flinched, clutching the box tighter, and whispered, "Please, save my baby." Jack's pulse kicked. He pried open the flaps of the box and froze. Inside, wrapped in a torn blanket, was a newborn, pale, lips bluish, chest barely moving. No time to think. Training took over. He pulled the baby out, cleared the airway, pressed 2 fingers against the tiny sternum, and began compressions while Rex circled protectively around them. The seconds stretched into eternity. The girl stared, tears cutting clean paths down her dirty cheeks. Then, a gasp. The infant drew in a shuddering breath. Color began to creep back beneath the fragile skin. Jack exhaled, not realizing he'd been holding his own breath. "Good job, little fighter," he murmured. He looked up at the girl. "What's your name?" "Emma," she whispered, voice small as the dusk around them. And that's Noah. He's my brother." Her words trembled, not from uncertainty but from exhaustion, a kind of weight no child should carry. Jack called for an ambulance, speaking calmly even as his heart thundered. While waiting, he offered Emma his water bottle. She refused at first, then sipped timidly, eyes darting down the alley like she expected a monster to crawl from it. When the paramedics arrived, a young EMT named Sarah Colton, tall, slender, with sunburned skin and quick, kind eyes, took Noah from Jack's arms. Sarah was the kind of woman who moved with quiet confidence, a practiced calm that came from seeing too much and refusing to turn cold. "You saved his life," she told Jack, then turned to the girl. "We'll take good care of your brother, sweetheart." But Emma clung to Jack's sleeve. "Please don't let him find us. Please don't let him find Mommy." Jack knelt to meet her gaze, every muscle in his chest tightening. "Who, Emma? Who are you afraid of?" The sirens echoed louder. Emma hesitated, then whispered, "My stepfather, Frank." Her lips quivered around the name like it was poison. The ambulance doors closed, taking Noah away in the arms of safety, while the echo of that single word, Frank, lingered in the alley like a warning. Jack watched the taillights fade, Rex sitting silently beside him, the dog's ears still tilted toward the darkness they had left behind. "Looks like we've got work to do, partner," Jack muttered. Rex wagged his tail once, a solemn agreement. Back at his office later that night, Jack replayed the evening in his mind. The smell of salt, the trembling voice, the bruises he'd glimpsed on Emma's wrist. Something about this case was wrong, in ways paperwork couldn't explain. He pulled up the name Frank Doyle through the police network. The file loaded slowly, lines of text illuminated in the blue glow of his monitor. Multiple arrests for assault. One conviction, restraining orders ignored. Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Outside, thunder rolled far off over the harbor. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, uneasy. Jack's thoughts drifted to Emma's last words. "He'll hurt Mommy." He looked down at Rex. "You feel that too, huh?" The dog gave a low whine, then turned toward the window, watching the storm build over the city. Somewhere out there, Jack knew, was a woman, battered, missing, maybe still alive, and a man who had left his fingerprints on fear itself. Jack poured himself a coffee gone cold, his reflection warped in the dark liquid. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we start with the house on Willow Street." The rain began to fall then, gentle at first, tapping the windows like ghostly fingers. But beneath that steady rhythm lay something else, the distant hum of danger, the promise that the night had only just begun. Morning heat laid a wavering veil over Willow Street as Jack Harris parked beneath a leaning live oak. He moved like a man who carried maps in his bones, measured, economical, while Rex, his 6-year-old German shepherd, hopped down with a soft grunt, tail low, ears high. The Bennett house hunched at the block's end, small, paint sun-peeled, porch rails split like old bone. Jack's knuckles grazed the door, its side inward. Inside smelled of milk turned and metal. A glass lay on its side, a spoon on the floor, a chair uselessly toppled as if it had tried to defend someone and failed. Jack cataloged without speaking, an oven mitt spattered brown, a hair tie snapped, a faint crescent of dried blood on the jam at shoulder height, impact at speed. He crouched. "Show me, partner." Rex quartered the kitchen, paws whispering, nose working like a machine of faith, then angled toward the back hall. The bedroom held a crib made of hope and unfinished plans. A folded onesie, yellow, tiny suns, rested on the dresser like a prayer. No diapers taken, no go-bag gone. Whoever left hadn't left willingly. Jack kept his mind level. Anger fogs glass. He lifted the mattress corner. Nothing. Checked the bathroom. Steam film dried in wavy fans. On the counter, a plain silver ring engraved LB, wiped once by a shaking thumb. In the living room, a TV screen dusted over sat beside a stack of library books, rubber-banded. On top, Charleston Birds of the Marsh with a slip due 3 days from now. People fleeing don't plan library returns. Jack phoned the hospital. Sarah Colton's voice crackled, steady, kind. Noah's holding strong. Emma asked for her mom twice, then slept with the stuffed turtle. "How's the house?" "Hollow," Jack said. No sign of Laura, no fresh tracks in the yard. He walked the perimeter. Rex tugged toward the trash cans, then lost interest, circling back to the porch where a single dark tire arc skimmed the curb, the kind of narrow tread used on cheap utility trailers. Jack measured with his boot, eyeing the radius. A thin smear of fresh grease glistened on the asphalt, petrochemical sharp. Down the block, an old man tended a rosebush like a ceremony. Mr. Calvin Reed, 70-ish, slim to transparency, skin papery bronze, white hair combed with a stubborn part, watched through bifocals. He wore a veteran's cap, not as boast, but as apology for surviving. "You live here long, Mr. Reed, 30 years and counting." His voice carried tobacco gravel softened by gentleness. "Heard a racket late last night. Not a husband and wife sort. Drawer dumped, furniture barkin'. Saw a guy pull a little trailer, beat up Chevy, primer gray fender, passenger mirror taped, license plate light busted. Noticed it 'cause I hate burned out lights. Face? Cap low, thick neck, walk like a man who swings, smelled like cheap gin and hot oil. Frank Doyle's shape fit that silhouette like a bad suit." Jack thanked him and knocked next door. A woman cracked it. Marisol Vega, late 20s, coffee dark hair and a tight bun, housekeeping scrubs, eyes both shy and steel. "Laura's kind," she said, voice low. "Brings soup when my mama's sick. She was scared of her husband. We heard him shout 2 days ago. After midnight. A truck, something metal dragging. Then silence." She pressed a scrap into Jack's hand, a wrinkled receipt from Cooper's Auto and Salvage, today's date, a handwritten note, FR, 2 tarp, padlock, cash. Marisol whispered, "It blew into my yard this morning. I thought it looked wrong." Jack's jaw tightened. He pocketed the receipt, left a card with both witnesses, and stroked RX's ear. "Cooper's first, then the salvage lots off the interstate." Rex sneezed, which in their private language meant hurry. On the drive, Jack replayed Emma whispering, "Don't let him find Mommy." He'd heard that plea before in other alleys, other wars, and he knew the undertow it left in a child's voice. At Cooper's Auto and Salvage, a corrugated fence ringed a yard of sunburned cars and scavenged fates. Behind the counter stood Gene Cooper, early 50s, long torso, short fuse, beard bristled salt and pepper like wire, forearms cross-hatched with old burns, oil streaks in the lines of his knuckles. People who live with engines learn 2 truths: metal lies less than men, and everything leaves residue. "Looking for a purchase," Jack said, flashing a PI credential scuffed by honest work. "Man named Frank, thick neck, cheap gin." Gene shrugged, then hesitated at Rex's steady gaze. "Had a guy like that this morning. Cash, 2 tarps, a big padlock, gallon of kerosene. Asked where to dump wet mattresses. Told him to hit one of the county bins." Jack's stare cooled. "You give him directions?" "Naw, I told him to get lost. He bought, he left. Drove a Chevy with primer fender, plate light dead. Had a small utility trailer, wobble wheel." Gene scratched his jaw, grudgingly helpful. "He asked about the old kiln off Briar Ferry Road. Abandoned brickworks. Folks use it to store junk, party, whatever. Nothing legal." Jack thanked him and slid a card across the counter. "If he returns, you call me before you call your conscience." Gene grunted, a non-committal pact. Outside, heat hit like a wall. Jack crouched to Rex. "Kiln!" The dog's eyes sharpened. They rolled. Briar Ferry Road cut through scrub pine and sorrow. The kiln squatted in a sun-bleached lot, its chimney like a finger stabbed into a sky too bright to forgive. Rex leapt from the car, nose high, then drove low, zigzagging through scent threads. At the kiln's mouth, Jack found scuffs in the sand, half-moons of rubber from a rolling bin, and a frayed rope end still warm from use. He followed Rex into darkness, cooled by clay and old fire. Far back, a rag tied to a nail, a woman's hair tie, rose-colored, still damp. Jack's throat clicked. He held it up. Sunlight caught one auburn hair. Laura. Near the wall, tape residue and a smear of fresh oil, as if a generator had been dragged and yanked away. He lifted his phone, snapping photos. Then a sound, faint and metallic, stuttered from deeper in, like chain-knocking brick in a tired heartbeat. Rex froze, muzzle pointed, one paw raised, silently asking, "May I?" Jack rested fingers on his fur, breath steady. He listened. The heartbeat stopped. Then a faraway engine coughed, somewhere beyond the trees behind the kiln, and a bird explosion rose like spilled black ink. Frank was moving his theater. Jack memorized the pattern of tire ruts snaking out toward the service road and back to the highway. He texted coordinates to himself and to Sarah because he wanted a second pair of trusted eyes on his last known location, then eased back into daylight. "We don't spook him," he told Rex. "We trail him until he blinks." He looked once at the kiln's mouth. The chain sound did not return. Jack slid behind the wheel and pulled onto the service road, where a narrow band of fresh mud bore the kiss of trailer tires turning east. He set his jaw. Laura was alive long enough to leave a sign. That was a contract. He would honor it. And somewhere between Willow Street and the kiln, a man who swung first and thought never had left enough crumbs for a shepherd's nose. Jack tightened his grip on the wheel. "We finish this," he said, and Rex, nose to the window seam, breathed in the future like a promise. The service road unfurled like a ribbon. Heat had tried to melt, leading Jack past scrub and billboard skeletons toward the interstate's low thunder. He let distance hold loose between him and the wobbling tracks, because men like Frank pivot on the smallest sound. Rex braced at the window, nostrils sampling the moving air, eyes flicking like a metronome between horizon and shoulder. A mile on, the ruts peeled into a narrow lane, swallowed by sawgrass and palmetto. Jack killed the engine, eased out, and took the rest on foot. The path ended at a storage compound that time and taxes had forgotten. Chain-link fencing patched with mismatched mesh, a sun-faded sign, Palmetto Mini Store, missing its last letters, and rows of corrugated doors the color of old nickels. A dusty office trailer perched at the entrance. Inside sat Ruby Hall, late 50s, short and efficient, hair dyed copper and clipped blunt, freckles faded into a kind, practical face. Her forearms were corded from a lifetime of moving boxes, others labeled Misk. She wore a ring on a chain around her neck and kept her pens aligned as if chaos had once cost her dearly. "We're closed till noon," she said, then took in Jack's eyes, Rex's focus, and revised her rules. "You need something." Jack showed his PI card. "Looking for a man with a primer fender Chevy and a short utility trailer." Ruby frowned. Unit B-17 rented cash at dawn. Man smelled like a gas station's trash can. Said he was storing tools. Didn't look like a man who keeps tools. "Where's B-17? "Back row, second bend. I shouldn't." "You should," Jack said gently, "if someone's life is squeaking on a chain." Ruby's mouth pinched, then she slid a key across the counter, eyes bright with fear she disguised as annoyance. "Don't get killed on my paperwork." Jack moved through the maze, Rex padding silent on hot concrete. Ahead, a generator's cough stuttered behind corrugation. He listened. A metallic scrape, then the linen-soft sound of someone trying not to cry. B-17's roll-up door sat half lowered. A new padlock, Cooper's brand, hung open, as if arrogance didn't require locks. Jack breathed once, texted 911 his coordinates, typed, "Possible kidnapping, adult female, suspect likely on site," and hit call. One ring, two, and then the air changed. A shadow detached from the hot glare and became a man. Frank Doyle filled the doorway to B-17. Late 30s, body like a stacked tire, thick in dangerous places, neck swallowing his collar, cheeks red-veined from alcohol and rage. His jaw's stubble looked like sandpaper glued on crooked. Pale eyes too close together gave him a perpetual squint that read people as threats, not humans. His right forearm bore a white crescent scar. Old bar fight. His voice came out low because men who shout learn that fear arrives quieter. "Hang up, hero." Jack's thumb hovered. The dispatcher said, "Sir?" Frank's fist moved faster than his words. The phone clattered. Line open. Rex launched, but Frank swung a length of rebar, catching the dog's ribs with a flat, ugly sound. Rex spun, recovered, growled deep and old. Jack took the next swing on his forearm, pain snapping through nerves like struck copper, and stepped inside the arc, driving his shoulder into Frank's sternum. They crashed against the half-raised door, which rattled like a drum. Inside the unit, in shadow, chains clinked and a hoarse female voice tried to rise. "Here," she croaked. "I'm here." Laura. Jack's mind made a blueprint on the fly. Disable the swing arm, open the door, break the chain, build distance. Frank grinned a crooked, mean crescent. "Always wanted to beat a cop," he spit, "but a PI will do." He feinted high. Jack parried. Rex darted low and clamped on Frank's calf. The man howled, swung the rebar blindly, clipped Rex's shoulder, missed Jack's jaw by an inch. Jack jabbed the man's throat heel first, just enough to fold him, then drove a knee up to break rhythm, not bone. Frank stumbled, eyes flaring with a child's surprise at pain. Sirens were a rumor, thin and far. Jack slid under the door as Frank regained his balance. Inside, the unit stank of kerosene, dust, and panic. Laura Bennett lay on her side, wrists taped to a pipe, hair damp with sweat. Auburn strands stuck to a cheek mottled with bruises. She was mid-20s, medium height, strong in the small ways, tendons drawn, jaw clenched, eyes lit by ferocity surviving fear. Her skin held the pallor of blood loss and days without sleep. "Emma?" she rasped. "Noah?" "Alive," Jack said. He sliced the tape with his pocket knife. "Hold still." Laura went still like a soldier obeying a command that hurt to follow. Outside, Frank bellowed. A bull finding his footing. Jack pressed his phone's speaker. The dispatcher's voice still bled from the line. "Sir, what is your storage yard off Briar Ferry, Palmetto Mini Storage? B-Row 17, send units and EMS," Jack snapped. "Suspect is violent. Female victim present. 1 K9 injured. Units en route." A metallic smash shook the door. Frank had found leverage. Laura, kneeling now, gripped Jack's sleeve with a hand that trembled but didn't shake. "He won't let us leave," she whispered. "Not again." Her pupils were wide, not with surrender but with calculation. She was scared, not soft. "He thinks if he hurts me enough, I'll stop being me." Jack met her eyes. "You are still you." Another smash. The door buckled, light slashing through. Jack looked at the room's spine. Shelves, crates, a dolly, a rolled rug that hid nothing, a gas can that meant something. He twisted the gas cap, sloshed a thread on the concrete between Frank and the door line, and flicked the spill away from Laura. "Smoke scares brave men," he said, grabbing a ratchet bar. "Rex," the dog panting, but bright, limped in, eyes never leaving the hinge. Jack set his back to Laura. "On my mark." The door jumped again. A wedge of hot day widened. Somewhere, faint but growing, sirens found their purpose. Langley's unit hit the gate at Palmetto Mini Storage less than 2 minutes after the open 911 line pinged a location. The chain link rolled back on a groan, and the first thing he smelled was kerosene, fresh, sharp, wrong for a storage yard at noon. He ran past the office trailer where Ruby Hall stood with a trembling keyring in her fist and rounded to B-17, weapon low and ready. The roll-up door was buckled in the middle like a kicked rib. From inside, a man's barked curse, a dog's warning growl, and the thin, steady voice of a woman trying to keep fear from tipping into panic. Jack had staged the scene to buy seconds. A ribbon of fuel snaked the threshold, not enough to ignite the place. Just enough to make anyone with a functioning brain hesitate. Frank Doyle had a functioning brain when it served him. Now it worked against him. He blinked at the sheen, and Jack took the rebar out of his hands with a twist and a levered pry that turned pain into compliance. Rex hit Frank's hip hard enough to move mass, then peeled off on Jack's command, the dog's breath coming fast through pain he refused to acknowledge. "Police!" Langley boomed from the door. "Hands where I can see them." Frank's eyes flicked, doing fast math. 1 detective inside, 1 K9, unknown officers outside. He lunged anyway. Jack met him with economy, forearm to forearm, pivot to the corrugated wall, knee to destabilize, open palm to throat to shut down the next sentence. Dana Chu slid right, taser tracked and ready. "Stop," she said, and when he didn't, she drove the darts home. The sound, electric and final, took the last bravado out of him. He stiffened, buckled, and Langley moved in with cuffs practiced by repetition and regret. "You have the right to remain silent," Langley read, breath even, cadence measured. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Frank lay on his side, chest pumping, eyes glassy with adrenaline and humiliation. "Dog bit me," he hissed. "You'll pay for that." Jack clicked the rebar away with a shove of his boot. "You started it," he said, and turned to Laura. Sarah Colton was already there, gloved and calm, another EMT threading vitals around Laura's shaking body. Tape residue ringed her wrists, a line of purple bruising already rising, cheekbones shadowed with older yellow-green blooms. "Can you breathe okay?" Sarah asked. "Any abdominal pain?" Laura shook her head, then steadied it. "I'm pregnant?" Sarah's eyes softened. "No, just making sure you didn't take a hit there." Laura managed a raw smile that looked more like survival than joy. "Noah," she rasped. "And Emma?" Jack crouched to her height, making the room smaller in a way that protected rather than trapped. Alive! Safe! You're going to see them today. Crime scene rolled hot from the main road. Chu sealed the unit with yellow tape, reading items into her body cam as she tagged. Them, metal rebar, likely weapon, one open kerosene can, one closed, plastic ties, adhesive tape, generator on dolly with warm engine, one padlock, brand consistent with Cooper's auto and salvage receipts. She photographed Laura's restraints before Sarah cut the last loop. Documentation first, dignity a hopeful second. Jack offered Sarah his phone. The dispatcher was still on speaker. Units on scene, he told her, voice plain. One suspect in custody, one adult female victim, one K9 injured, EMS present. The dispatcher exhaled a soft copy, the kind a human makes when the worst possibility has receded an inch. Rex let his weight drop to a sit, the movement controlled but careful. Jack's hands went to the dog's ribs like prayer. Let me see. The left side was already tender, a rising egg beneath the fur. Jack's relief was practical. No crepitus, no drop in gum color, no weird heart rate. Bruised, not broken. He tapped out a text to his vet, who answered with a curt, "Bring him now!" Then to Langley, "K9 to vet, back for statements." Langley nodded. "Go, we've got scene control." He turned to Frank, who had found enough breath to remember a script. "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," Langley said, tone neutral, "and a tetanus shot." Jack walked Laura to the ambulance, Sarah on the other side as a moving brace. Laura's first step onto the bumper shook. "He kept saying I made him look small," she said to no one in particular. "And small men hate mirrors," Jack said, holding her gaze until it stopped skittering. "You didn't make him? He's been that way a long time." At Mercy, Sarah handed Laura to the intake nurse with the efficiency of a woman who could build triage out of a paperclip and 2 kind words. Jack signed Rex in at the adjacent vet clinic 2 blocks over, then jogged back, shirt stuck to his spine, forearm throbbing beneath a swelling that announced itself with heat. He wasn't 25 anymore, but the math still worked. You show up, you finish. Back at Palmetto, Chu briefed him fast. "We've got Ruby's access logs, a cash rental for B17 at 0720 Solve. Camera caught the truck tail just long enough to confirm primer fender and a plate light out." She handed over a print, pixelated but sufficient. Gene Cooper ID'd the buyer by description earlier, and he's already on record. We'll pull his receipts for the tarps and padlock. "Chain of custody?" Jack asked. "Clean," Chu said, pride under the word. "You teed it up." Langley returned from loading Frank. "Booking him downtown," he said. "Charges to start, kidnapping, aggravated assault, attempted murder, false imprisonment, felony domestic violence, cruelty to animals. DA will stack what sticks." He looked at Jack's arm. "You need that checked." Jack flexed his fingers. "After I talked to Laura, hospital hallways are their own weather." Jack found the room by following the steady current of competence. Sarah's voice, a resident's clipped questions, the rustle of gauze. Laura sat propped against starched pillows, her wrists cleaned, the tape track a red border around pale skin. A detective from the DV unit, Marta Alvarez, mid-40s, compact with a steady center, sat beside her with a thin recorder and a thicker patience. Alvarez nodded at Jack, a nod that said, "Good work. Now don't break the timeline." "We're doing a soft interview," she said low. "No kids in the room, just anchoring details while memory is hot." Jack stayed out of the recorder's cone and listened. Laura's words came in spare sentences. What time Frank came home, what he said, the shove that sent her into the counter, the restraint, the truck, the storage unit, the threat repeated in different words until it lost grammar. Alvarez marked notes with soft clicks, guiding without leading. By the time the sun rose over Charleston's waterfront, the story had already broken. "Detective saves mother and child from abusive husband," the headline read, though Jack Harris hated the word saves. The real rescue, he knew, began long before the storage unit, in the small defiance that made a woman shield her daughter, in the courage that pushed a 5-year-old to carry her newborn brother through darkness. What he and Rex did was simply show up where the light was trying to break through. The courthouse was packed that afternoon, thick with the murmur of reporters, advocates, and curiosity seekers. Frank Doyle sat at the defense table, his once puffed arrogance now reduced to hollow eyes and cuffed wrists. He wore the same stained work boots from that night, his face a map of denial and resentment. Across the aisle, Laura sat beside Assistant District Attorney Helen Monroe, a steady woman in her early 40s with a firm voice and a calm presence that made juries lean in when she spoke. Laura's hands trembled only once, when the bailiff brought in the box she had used to carry her newborn. Jack was sworn in as a witness. His voice was clipped, precise. Years of courtroom testimony had taught him how to hold emotion under control. When we arrived, he told the court, the suspect had the victim restrained inside Unit B-17. He attempted to resist arrest. My K-9, Rex, engaged on command, preventing further harm. He paused only once, his eyes meeting Laura's. The victim displayed clear signs of trauma and neglect. The child's survival was nothing short of a miracle. Monroe used that word deliberately in her closing argument. A miracle, she said to the jury, not of luck, but of love. Love that survived terror, hunger, and cruelty, and a child's faith that someone, somewhere, would help. Her voice softened. Mr. Doyle didn't just harm his family. He buried them in fear, and when they clawed their way back to the surface, he tried to bury them again. But the truth, like light, finds its way through even the darkest soil. The verdict was unanimous. Frank Doyle was sentenced to life without parole, the courtroom silent except for Laura's quiet sob. It wasn't triumph, it was release. Jack left before the cameras started, his badge heavy, but his steps lighter. Rex waited by the cruiser, tail thumping once against the asphalt. "You did good," Jack murmured, scratching behind his ear. The dog leaned into his hand, the kind of trust that didn't need words. A week later, Jack stood outside the Bennett family's temporary housing, a small white house near the edge of the marsh. The cicadas hummed like static, and sunlight glimmered on the water beyond the fence. Laura opened the door with Emma beside her. The little girl was clean now, her blonde hair brushed into soft curls. She ran toward Rex, who lowered his great head to meet her small hands. "He remembers me," Emma said. "Of course he does," Jack replied. "He doesn't forget the brave ones." Laura invited him in. The house smelled faintly of new paint and hope. Baby Noah slept in a cradle by the window, wrapped in a blue blanket donated by the community center. On the table sat a small framed photo of all three of them, taken by Sarah Colton after the hospital discharge. Laura poured coffee, her hands steadier than before. "They said you don't usually take cases like this anymore," she said. "Not since your wife passed?" Jack looked at the steam rising from the mug. "She used to volunteer at shelters, said if you can't stop the darkness, at least help someone carry a light through it." He smiled faintly. "Guess I finally listened." Outside, Rex barked at a passing pelican, tail wagging hard enough to rattle the porch boards. Emma laughed, a sound so pure it made Jack's chest ache. "He's happy," she said. "So are you," he answered. She tilted her head, considering. "Because Mommy smiles again. That means God's here, right?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, Emma, maybe he never left." As the sun began to set, Jack stood by his car watching the family framed in the golden light of the doorway. He thought of the long nights, the cold cases, the years spent chasing ghosts and guilt. This one felt different. This one felt like grace. Later that evening, he stopped by the church near the old district. He hadn't stepped inside since his wife's funeral. The pews were empty except for an old janitor humming a hymn under his breath. Jack lit a candle, not for Doyle, not even for Laura, but for the small girl who refused to let the world end before dawn. The flame flickered, steadying as it climbed. As he left, his phone buzzed, a message from Sarah Colton. "Baby Noah's breathing stronger. Laura asked if she could visit the precinct to thank you. I told her you'd say no, but she insisted." Jack smiled, typing back. "Let her come. Some things deserve to end with light." Outside, Rex trotted ahead, pausing at the curb as if sensing something beyond human reach. Jack followed his gaze to the horizon, where thunderheads were fading and a single beam of sunlight split the clouds. He placed a hand on Rex's head. "Come on, partner," he said quietly. "There's still work to do." The city, bruised but alive, exhaled around them. Somewhere, a baby cried, a mother sang, and a detective who no longer believed in miracles began to see them everywhere, in the bark of a loyal dog, in a child's fearless eyes, in the fragile faith that the light would always return. And if you've followed this far, remember, sometimes the smallest acts of courage can be someone's salvation. So, don't just watch. Be the light, share the story, leave a comment, subscribe, and carry faith forward. Because somewhere tonight, another cry for help waits to be heard. At the end of this story, remember that miracles are rarely loud. They do not always come as lightning in the sky or voices from clouds. More often they arrive quietly in the courage of a frightened child, the loyalty of a dog, the compassion of a stranger, or the decision of one person to keep believing that goodness still matters. When Jack and Rex found Emma and Noah, it was not luck, it was grace moving through ordinary hands. And that is how God still works, through people willing to listen, to act, to love. In our daily lives, we pass by alleys of our own, a neighbor struggling in silence, a friend too proud to ask for help, a story half told behind tired eyes. The invitation is always the same, to be the miracle someone is praying for. Take a moment today to be that light. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little hope. Leave a comment about what faith means to you. And subscribe for more stories where love conquers fear. May God bless you and your family, fill your home with peace, and guide your steps so that you might carry His quiet miracles into every ordinary day. Amen.